You grab the spray bottle. Again. It's early morning, the light is just coming up over the garden and you're already out there because you spotted the damage last night and you couldn't stop thinking about it. The leaves on your zucchini look like something took a hole punch to them. Your kale has that silvery streaking that means thrips. And the basil you planted specifically because you read it repels pests, has aphids clustered on every new shoot. So you shake the bottle, you spray everything down, and you tell yourself this time it'll work. This time you used more. This time you got the undersides of the leaves. I know that feeling because I lived it for years. I was the guy who had 6 different organic sprays lined up on the potting bench like a little green pharmacy. Name oil, insecticidal soap, pyrethrin, a garlic spray, a peppermint mix my neighbor swore by. I rotated them. I researched them. I timed applications to the weather. And every single season the pests came back. Not just came back, they seem to come back harder. What nobody tells you is that spraying is a reaction, and pests don't care about your reactions. By the time you're spraying, the population has already established. The eggs are already in the soil. The cycle is already running. You're not solving the problem. You're just interrupting it briefly before it resets. The spray isn't failing because you're using the wrong brand. It's failing because spraying by itself was never designed to be a complete solution. Here's what changed my thinking. A few years back, I spent time studying the traditional farming practices of ancient Anatolia, the heartland of what is now Turkey, one of the oldest continuously cultivated agricultural regions on Earth. Families growing food on the same land for 5, 6, 7 generations, with no synthetic inputs and no organic spray routine either. And their plants were cleaner than anything I'd grown. Not perfect, but genuinely noticeably healthier. Less damage, more vigor. I asked one of the elder farmers what he used for pests. He looked at me for a second and said, "We don't fight them. We make sure they don't want to be here." That one sentence reorganized everything I thought I knew about pest control. And that's exactly what this video is about. Stay with me through the end, because I'm going to share one technique these families use at transplant time that I've never seen in any gardening book, and it takes about 30 seconds to do. When I first started digging into why organic sprays keep failing, I went looking for a better spray. I spent a whole winter going down that rabbit hole. Research papers, university extension sites, homesteading forums, YouTube deep dives. I was convinced the solution was still a bottle. Just the right bottle. Same result. Pests came back. That's when something shifted in how I was asking the question. I stopped asking, what should I spray? And started asking, why does spraying keep failing? And that question led me to a paper out of Cornell University's Department of Entomology that stopped me cold. The researchers had been studying why certain plants in biologically active soil showed measurably lower pest damage than the same plant varieties grown in conventional or depleted soil. Not slightly lower. Significantly lower. Plants grown in compost-amended, microbially rich soil had thicker cell walls, higher concentrations of natural defensive compounds, and recovered from pest feeding faster. The conclusion was straightforward. The plant's ability to resist pests is largely determined before the pest ever arrives. It's built, or not built, in the soil. Every time I'd been spraying, I'd been treating a symptom of a much earlier problem. The pest damage on my leaves wasn't the problem, it was the report card. No spray in the world fixes an upstream problem by hitting the leaves. That realization sent me back to the ancient Anatolian farming tradition with completely different eyes. What I found wasn't a secret formula or a proprietary method. It was a complete philosophy about the relationship between soil, plants, insects, and intervention, passed down through generations of families who had no choice but to get it right. When your entire food supply depends on your garden and you have no access to a farm supply store, you figure out very quickly what actually works versus what just feels like it's working. The ancient Anatolian concept behind this philosophy carries the meaning of dengue, balance, trusting the design of the system rather than trying to override it. Working within the balance rather than constantly reacting against it. And here is where it becomes directly practical for your garden. When you spray, even an organic spray, you are overriding the system. You're not just hitting the aphids or the hornworms. You're hitting everything. The ladybugs, the lacewings, the parasitic wasps that lay eggs inside caterpillars and kill them from the inside. The ground beetles that patrol your soil surface at night eating cutworm larvae before they ever reach your stems. These are not background characters. They are your first line of defense, and most of us have been systematically eliminating them every time we reach for a bottle, then wondering why the pests keep winning. It's not that the pests are getting stronger, it's that we keep removing their predators. The reason your organic spray keeps failing is not the spray itself. Name oil works, insecticidal soap works, garlic spray works. They all do something. The problem is that spraying is a one-dimensional response to a multi-dimensional problem. It addresses the pest you can see right now. It does nothing for the soil conditions that made your plant vulnerable. It does nothing to rebuild the predator populations that were already managing that pest before you noticed it. And in many cases, it actively damages both. You're not losing this battle because you haven't found the right weapon. You're losing it because you've been fighting a systems problem with a point solution. What the ancient Anatolian farmers figured out, and what the science now confirms, is that pest control done right looks less like warfare and more like design. You design the conditions where pests struggle to establish, where your plants are strong enough to handle moderate pressure, and where natural predators are always present and always working. That's the framework. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Let's build the system. There are 5 steps. Each one makes the next one more effective. Step 1. Fix the foundation. Build your soil before you plant anything. This is where pest control actually begins. Not on the leaves. Not at the garden center. Here in the ground before a single seed goes in. Remember what the Cornell research showed us. Plants grown in biologically active, compost-amended soil produce stronger cell walls and higher concentrations of natural defensive compounds. The plant's resistance is built in the soil weeks before the pest ever shows up. Every spring, before you plant anything, spread 2 to 3 inches of well-aged compost across your beds and work it into the top 4 to 6 inches of soil. If you can access compost that includes aged animal manure, horse, cow, chicken, even better. The combination of plant matter and animal waste creates a microbial diversity in your soil that store-bought fertilizer simply cannot replicate. The key is doing this every single year, not once. After 1 season, you'll notice your plants look more vigorous. After 2 seasons, you'll notice the pest damage starts dropping. After 3 seasons, your garden will feel genuinely different. Thicker stems, darker leaves, plants that bounce back from minor feeding instead of collapsing under it. Step 2, never plant alone. Use companion planting to create olfactory confusion. Most pests don't find your plants by sight. They find them by smell. A long single crop row is essentially a scent highway pointing straight to your vegetables. Ancient Anatolian gardens break that signal on purpose. They interplant strong-smelling herbs and flowers directly among their vegetables so that pests cannot isolate the scent of their target crop. Entomologists call this olfactory confusion. The pest arrives, gets hit with a wall of competing signals, and moves on. For every 3 to 4 tomato plants, tuck 1 basil plant 8 to 10 inches from the base. Basil repels aphids, whiteflies, and tomato hornworms. Between rows of cabbage, broccoli, or kale, plant dill or cilantro every 12 to 14 inches. These repel cabbage moths above ground and attract parasitic wasps and hoverflies when they flower. Along the borders of every bed, plant French marigolds. Their roots release a compound called alpha-terthianol that suppresses root knot nematodes in the soil. Their scent above ground deters whiteflies and squash bugs. Multiple agricultural universities have confirmed the nematode suppressing effect. This isn't folk wisdom. It's documented chemistry. Step 3, recruit your allies, build an insectary strip. Here's the shift most gardeners never make. We put enormous energy into killing the bad insects and almost no energy into keeping the good ones. Ancient Anatolian farmers never made that mistake. A single ladybug eats up to 50 aphids per day. One lacewing larva consumes 200 aphids in its short lifetime. Parasitic wasps lay their eggs inside hornworms and cabbage worms, killing them from the inside out. Ground beetles patrol your soil at night, eating slugs, cutworm larvae, and grubs before they ever reach your plants. These creatures are already in your ecosystem. Your job is simply to give them a reason to stay. Plant a 2-foot wide border along one edge of your garden with sweet alyssum, yarrow, dill, and fennel. Plant sweet alyssum at the front since it stays low and blooms continuously. Alternate yarrow and dill behind it 10 to 12 inches apart. Within a few weeks of first bloom, that strip will be actively buzzing with beneficial insects that patrol your entire garden. You've essentially hired a permanent pest management crew that works around the clock and costs you nothing after planting. One critical detail, you need continuous bloom from early spring through fall. If your insectary strip stops flowering, your beneficials leave to find food elsewhere. Step 4, walk your garden every morning. This step sounds too simple to matter. It isn't. Every Anatolian farmer I studied described the morning walk the same way, not as a chore, not as a pest management strategy, just as part of the day. You walk slowly, early before the heat sets in. You turn over leaves, you check the undersides of squash foliage. You run your eyes along every stem. And when you find a pest, you pick it off by hand and drop it into a small bucket of soapy water. The reason this works comes down to population dynamics. Pest damage rarely happens because of one or two bugs. It happens because a small population was allowed to grow unchecked until the damage became visible, and by then you're already losing. A single tomato hornworm can strip an entire branch in 48 hours. 2 hornworms caught on Monday morning is 0 hornworms. The same 2 hornworms ignored until Friday is potentially 20. Give yourself 15 to 20 minutes. Work from one end of the garden to the other. Every row, every day. After 2 seasons of doing this, it stops feeling like work. It becomes the best part of the morning, and the pest pressure you're managing by hand is pressure you never have to spray for. Step 5. Use trap crops to redirect, not just repel. Instead of trying to keep every pest out of your garden, you give them a better option, and you plant it somewhere that doesn't matter. Ancient Anatolian farmers have been doing this for generations. Nasturtiums are the classic example. Aphids are far more attracted to nasturtiums than to beans, peppers, or tomatoes. Plant nasturtiums in a ring around the outside of your garden. The aphids cluster there and largely ignore your main crops. For flea beetles on eggplant and brassicas, plant a row of radishes 2 feet in front of your main planting. Flea beetles prefer radish leaves. Sacrifice the radish tops, your eggplants stay clean. For squash vine borers and cucumber beetles, plant 2 or 3 blue Hubbard squash plants at the far corners of your garden. They are magnets for both pests. Your main squash crop stays protected while the pests do exactly what their biology designed them to do, just somewhere you don't mind. Trap cropping requires no daily labor, no products, no sprays. You plant it once at the start of the season and it works until frost. Those are your 5 steps. Soil first. Companion planting second, beneficial habitat third. Daily observation fourth, trap crops fifth. Each layer reinforces the others. None of them alone is the whole answer. Together they build a garden that manages itself. Before we go any further, I want to stop and say something that most gardening content will never say to you. Everything I just walked you through, the soil building, the companion planting, the insectary strip, the morning walk, the trap crops, none of it is complicated. None of it is expensive. And the information has been available in various forms for decades. So why didn't you know this already? More importantly, why have you been spraying for years without anyone sitting you down and saying, the spray is not the solution, it never was, and here's what actually works? That's the question worth sitting with. The spray exists because it sells. I'm not here to vilify any company or any product. Neem oil is a real thing. Insecticidal soap does real things. Pyrethrin has genuine effects on soft-bodied insects. These are not fraudulent products, but they are products. And products need repeat customers. A bag of French marigold seeds costs $2 and lasts a season. A bottle of organic spray costs $12 to $18 and runs out in 6 weeks. A handful of nasturtium seeds planted at the edge of your garden is a one-time investment. The system that keeps you spraying is not designed to teach you that you don't need to spray. And the gardening content ecosystem, which is largely funded by affiliate links and product recommendations, has very little financial incentive to point you toward a $2 seed packet as the answer to your aphid problem. The most effective interventions are almost entirely free, and the reason you haven't been doing them has more to do with what you've been shown than what you're capable of. The second thing nobody tells you is that some pest presence is not a problem. We were taught by product marketing, by gardening books, by the general anxiety that comes with growing your own food, that any insect damage means something has gone wrong, that a few aphids on the basil is a crisis. The ancient Anatolian farmers don't see it that way, and neither does the science. A small pest population is not a failure. It is food. It's the thing that keeps your ladybugs in the garden, your lacewings laying eggs, your parasitic wasps patrolling. If you spray every time you see 3 aphids on a stem, you remove the food source that was keeping your beneficial predator population alive. The next time aphids arrive, and they will, and there are no predators left to manage them. What you were treating as a problem was actually the system doing its job. You interrupted it. The third thing is about what organic actually means and doesn't mean. Organic does not mean harmless to beneficial insects. Pyrethrin is derived from chrysanthemum flowers. It is certified organic. It is also broadly toxic to beneficial insects including bees, ladybugs, lacewings, and parasitic wasps. Spinosad, another commonly used organic insecticide, is highly toxic to bees when wet. Even neem oil, applied heavily and repeatedly, disrupts the feeding and reproduction cycles of a wide range of insects, not just the ones you're targeting. The organic label tells you something about the source of the compound. It tells you very little about its impact on your garden's ecosystem. This is not a fringe position. This is mainstream entomology. All right, I promised you this at the start, so let's get into it. Everything we've covered so far, the soil building, the companion planting, the insectary strip, the morning walk, the trap crops, that's the system. That's the architecture. But there's a gap in that system that none of those steps addresses directly. And it's the gap where most gardeners lose the most plants without ever understanding why. It's the first 3 weeks after transplanting. When you move a seedling from a protected indoor environment into open garden soil, it goes through a period of genuine physiological stress. The root system is disturbed. The stem is soft. The plant's natural defensive chemistry hasn't fully activated yet because the plant is putting every available resource into re-establishing its root network. It is, in the most literal biological sense, at its most vulnerable. And pests know it. Not consciously, the insects don't think. But chemically, a stressed transplant broadcasts a different signal than an established plant. To a pest navigating by smell and taste, a freshly transplanted seedling is the equivalent of a neon sign that reads, "Easy target, come now." Cutworms in particular are devastating during this window. These are the larvae of several moth species that live in your soil and crawl along the surface at night, chewing through the base of young stems at soil level. One cutworm, one night, and a seedling you've been nurturing for 6 weeks indoors is lying on the soil by morning, severed clean at the base. I lost plants to cutworms for 3 seasons before I understood what was happening. I blamed slugs. I blamed damping off. I blamed bad luck. It wasn't any of those things. It was cutworms, working at night, invisible during the day, completely undetected until the damage was already done. Here's what the ancient Anatolian farmers do about it. And this is the part I've never seen written down in any gardening guide, extension publication, or homesteading book. Not because it's a secret exactly, but because it's so simple that nobody thinks to write it down. It gets passed from parent to child, family to family, generation to generation as just part of how you plant. When transplanting any seedling into the garden, they place a collar around the base of each plant at the time of transplanting. Not after, not when they spot damage. At the moment of planting, every time, without exception. The collar is made from a cardboard tube, an old toilet paper roll or a paper towel roll cut into thirds. That's the entire material list. They push it about 1 inch into the soil around the base of the stem and let it rise 2 to 3 inches above the soil surface. The collar forms a physical cylinder around the most vulnerable part of the plant, the stem at soil level, and creates a barrier the cutworm cannot cross to reach it. Cutworms are surface feeders. They move along the soil surface in a fairly straight line, encounter a stem, and chew through it at ground level. The cardboard collar interrupts that straight line path. The cutworm hits the collar, finds no entry point, and moves on. Your stem, 1 inch inside that collar, is completely protected. And here's why the timing makes this technique so elegant. The cardboard breaks down naturally in soil over 4 to 6 weeks, right around the time the plant stem has hardened and thickened enough that a cutworm can no longer chew through it cleanly anyway. The protection is there precisely during the window it's needed and gone by the time it isn't. You don't have to remove it. No plastic waste. No residue in the soil. The cardboard breaks down and becomes part of your organic matter. I started using these collars 3 seasons ago after an Anatolian farming tradition demonstrated it to me so casually, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. The first spring I used collars on everything. Tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, squash, brassicas, every single transplant. I lost 1 plant. One. And that one went in late on a day I ran out of cardboard tubes and told myself it would probably be fine. It was not fine. Every single intervention we've covered in this video, the compost, the companion planting, the insectary strip, the morning walk, the trap crops, and now the collar, shares one characteristic. They all work with the biology rather than against it. They don't try to override the system. They work within the logic of how living systems actually function. The cardboard collar doesn't kill cutworms. It simply removes the opportunity. The cutworm is still there doing what cutworms do. Your plant is just no longer available to it during the one window when it was genuinely at risk. That's dengue in practice, not fighting the natural order but working within it. And it comes from a farming tradition that has been protecting transplants this way since before synthetic pesticides existed. Let me bring everything together before I let you go. You do not need to implement all of this at once. I added one layer at a time over several seasons. The system built itself gradually, and every single layer I added made a noticeable difference on its own before the next one went in. So if you're sitting here thinking about where to start, and start with the soil. Just the soil. 2 to 3 inches of compost worked into your beds before you plant anything this season. That one change, done consistently for 2 or 3 years, will do more for your pest situation than every spray you've ever bought combined. Everything else can follow at whatever pace your time and energy allow. Here's the full picture, condensed. Step 1. Build your soil every year without exception. 2 to 3 inches of well-aged compost before planting, worked into the top 4 to 6 inches. Do this annually. The results compound. Step 2. Never plant a crop alone. Tuck basil between your tomatoes. Run dill between your brassicas. Border every bed with French marigolds. Confuse the pests before they find what they're looking for. Step 3. Build your insectary strip. A 2-foot border of sweet alyssum, yarrow, dill, and fennel along one edge of your garden. Keep something in bloom from early spring through fall. Hire the crew that works for free. Step 4. Walk your garden every morning. 15 minutes. A bucket of soapy water. Catch the problems while they're 2 hornworms, not 20. Let the daily rhythm connect you to what's actually happening in your beds. Step 5. Plant your trap crops at the edges. Nasturtiums for aphids, radishes for flea beetles, blue Hubbard squash for vine borers. Give the pests a better address and let them go there instead. And the bonus, collar every transplant at the moment of planting. A toilet paper roll pushed 1 inch into the soil. 30 seconds per plant. The single simplest intervention I've ever added to my garden and one of the highest impact ones. That's the system. 6 layers. All of them free or nearly free. All of them working with the biology rather than against it. All of them drawn from a farming tradition rooted in the ancient soils of Anatolia, a culture that has been feeding families without synthetic inputs for thousands of years. Now I want to hear from you, and I mean that more specifically than the usual. Drop a comment below. Tell me where you are in this. Not just your growing zone, though that's useful too, but where you are in your relationship with your garden and pest control, because I think this community has a lot of collective knowledge that deserves to be in the conversation. If you've been spraying for years and this video reframed something for you, tell me what shifted. Was it the predator population piece? The soil health connection? The idea that some pest presence is actually the system working? I want to know which part landed because it helps me understand what to go deeper on in future videos. If you've already been doing some version of this, companion planting, insectary strips, morning scouting, tell me what's working in your specific climate and zone. Someone gardening in Zone 9 in central Turkey has figured out things about managing pest pressure in heat that would genuinely help people watching this in similar climates. That knowledge exists in this community right now. Put it in the comments. If you tried the cardboard collar technique this season, or you've been using something similar and never knew it had a tradition behind it, tell me about it. Tell me if it worked. Tell me if you modified it. Tell me if you lost the one plant you didn't collar, like I did, because you ran out of toilet paper rolls and decided to gamble. And if you're brand new to gardening, or you've been at it for years and still feel like you're losing, tell me that too. Tell me what your biggest pest problem is right now in your specific garden, and I will do my best to address it either in the comments or in a dedicated video. The questions you ask in the comments section of this channel directly shape what I make next. About subscribing, I'm going to ask you to subscribe, but I want to be honest about what that actually means on this channel. I make deep dives, not listicles, not 30-second tips, not product roundups, long-form explorations of how traditional farming cultures and pre-industrial food systems solved problems that modern gardeners are still struggling with, and what the current science says about why those solutions work. The Anatolian series alone has more videos planned. We're going to go into ancient Anatolian water management practices, a soil moisture approach during drought conditions that I've never seen covered anywhere in the gardening space. We are going to cover traditional seed-saving systems which are more sophisticated than most people realize and directly tied to how plants develop pest resistance across generations. We are going to look at winter soil practices, what these ancient farmers did to the ground between the harvest and the spring planting, and why that window might actually be more important than anything you do during the growing season. Beyond that, I'm working on deep dives into traditional Korean natural farming, into the raised bed systems used by pre-Columbian Andean cultures that are now being studied by climate adaptation researchers, and into Japanese landscape management philosophy that produces food while actively increasing biodiversity rather than reducing it. If any of that sounds like the kind of content you want more of, the subscribe button is right there. It's free. It costs you nothing. And it means the next time I put something like this together, it shows up for you instead of disappearing into the algorithm. One last thing before I go. There's a version of this video that ends with me selling you something. A course, a seed kit, a companion planting guide, a consultation. I'm not doing that today. Not because those things don't exist or because I never will, but because this particular video is about dismantling the idea that the answer to your garden problems is something you buy. It would feel wrong to close that argument by asking you to buy something. The answer to your pest problem is in your compost pile. It's in a $2 packet of French marigold seeds. It's in 15 minutes every morning before the rest of your household wakes up. It's in a cardboard tube that was headed for the recycling bin. It was always there. You just needed someone to point at it directly and say, "That's the thing." Start there. I hope this video was that for you. Thank you.